And greetings, everyone. Happy Sunday, and welcome back to the Always a Queen, the Metamorphosis platform for another Sunday afternoon live. My name is Therese Millett Joseph. I am the founder of the Always a Queen, the Metamorphosis platform. And this is a platform, just in case anybody is tuning in for the very first time, where we specialize in the empowerment of queens. We are here to elevate, to empower, to heal, to encourage, to level up, and just basically put all of our queens in a position to live a healthier and more functional lifestyle. So if this is the kind of content that you are into, then you should follow and like and subscribe to all of the Always a Queen platforms. Today, however, our conversation is not going to be specifically about the queens. We're going to be talking about the children, which of course is of interest to the queens, because who are the primary caregivers in our communities? The queens. So we are dedicating today's podcast to our children, to our babies, because they are very, very important to us. And we're going to be digging into a conversation today about anxiety and depression in our children. And I have invited a few of my sister queens to help me unpack this topic here today. And I said to them before we came live, that I am not the resident expert on this panel today. On today, the experts are these three women you see right here on the screen. I'm just here to facilitate the conversation because they work day in and day out with children. So while I do clinical work as well, all of my clinical work revolves around the adults. So I feel like they are in a much better position to speak on this than I am. So I'm going to be kicking the ball over into their courts quite a lot. So when you see me doing that, you'll know why. So I'm going to give them an opportunity to greet all of our listeners and our viewers as well. None of them are strangers to the platform, but I will let them give you a greeting nonetheless in case anybody doesn't know them. So we will start off with Serene. Serene, tell the people who you are and what you do.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Serene Prince. I am a holistic psychotherapist. Where do I start? So I'm a CEO of Orchard Blue Counseling Services based in New York. I'm the CEO of Counseling and Consulting with Serene based in Antigua and Barbuda. I am a multi-licensed state psychotherapist, meaning I'm licensed in New York, New Jersey, and Florida. I'm an expert in child and adolescent psychotherapy, and I am a global parent wellness coach.
Whew. Okay, you see why I'm not the expert today. All right. Thank you, Serene. And then over to Samista.
A pleasant good afternoon, everybody. Peace and blessings. My name is Samista Ellis, and I am the deputy principal at the Antigua Girls High School. I've been an educator for over 20 years now, and that's about it in a nutshell. And I'm here to share, and I crave the indulgence of the audience as my presence here will be somewhat dispersed because, and I thank you, Therese, for allowing me the
Uh-oh. I think we have lost Samista. Okay, Zara, go ahead and jump in until we get Samista back. Samista, we lost you for a couple of seconds there.
Oh, wow. I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, your audio went out so we didn't catch the last part of what you said. Last thing we heard was thank you for having me on, and then I lost you after that.
Okay, so I was saying that my presence here will be a bit divided. Well, I don't want to use the word divided. That's not a good word. But I'll start with you guys.
Okay, we lost you again. Okay, seem to have lost her again. All right, Zara, carry on, jump in.
Hi, hello everyone. Zara Errol here. Like Semester, I've been an educator for over 20 years, and I've been a theater practitioner for well over 30 years. And I'm also a social activist with main concentration on women's and children's rights.
All right, okay, very good. Greetings to the queens who are in the chat section. Hello, Queen Monique. And also I see Pamela Farrell. Thank you so much for being here. Hopefully we will get some Mr. back before too long, but we're going to go straight into our conversation. We're talking about anxiety and depression in our children. School-aged children, to be specific. So I want to start off the conversation by just basically putting some definitions out there, because I know that anxiety and depression can be words or language that is used very loosely, shall we say. And so I want to make sure that we're putting clear definitions out there so people understand that we're not talking about your child's favorite character in their Disney cartoon died and they are saddened by it and they cry for a couple of minutes and then they move on to eat the ice cream that they left in the freezer. That's not what we're talking about. Okay? And so I want us to put some clear definitions out there so that we're not just randomly saying, oh, she's so depressed. Or, oh, he's so anxious. He has anxiety. You know what I mean? So let's start off with some definitions. What exactly, for the purpose of today's discussion, are we defining as depression? Let's start with that. What exactly are we referring to as depression today? I feel like Serena is probably the best one to tackle that question. No, not the best one.
Yeah, I mean, clinical depression, we all, I like to tell people that all of these symptoms and diagnoses, that we all experience them at some point in our lives, and it is normal to experience it. And so today, I imagine we're talking about when the diagnosis starts to impair your functioning. And depression, I think a lot of times when people think about depression, they're thinking about suicide, and that's not always the case. While there's an increase in awareness of persons having suicidal thoughts and attempts, you're less likely to want to kill yourself than anything else. So I just want to clarify that. So depression, for the most part, is just really feeling a sense of despair most of the days out of the week, where you're not feeling a sense of happiness on average most of the time. So you're sort of in this sense of despair, and the sort of lenses that you have is that each experience that you have is not enjoyable, or that you will not enjoy something that either you once enjoyed or that you've never tried before without any evidence, so to speak. So I would say that in summary, I would define it as a depression because there are different types of depression. You have persistent depression where, we may have a coworker, where we're like, oh, that person is so miserable. They're always unhappy. They always speak negatively about any and everything. That person may have persistent depression. And that can also lead to a sense of not wanting to be here. And then you also have persons who experience major depression, and there's different levels to that, and that's usually short term, whether it's because there was a death in the family, whether it's because physiologically there's a brain, the way that their brain interacts or experience certain situations that they experience, they're more prone to major depression of mild, moderate, and severe. And in that, because I don't want to go into the clinical terms, that also impairs the person. They experience it at different levels. And usually it lasts, depending on the situation, it can last more than 14 days, going all the way into 30 days to 6 months. And the reason why I give that spectrum, because we're all different, and that if you're experiencing grief, for me as a clinician, I'm not like, oh, you're clinically depressed. I'm looking at your grief. I'm looking at if it's complicated. I'm looking at how you lost a person. A person that lost a loved one during the pandemic. I mean, really and truly, there was a sense of dissociation that many of us experienced, and it wasn't your typical loss, especially when it disrupted the way in which culturally you may engage in death and dying. And so I would say, well, there was probably delayed grief because all these other things were going on. Also, that we all grieve differently, and our life circumstances contribute to it. We grieve, and so that person may be in a sense of depression longer than anticipated. But what I'm looking at is how you're functioning and if you're meet your needs to get from day to day.
Okay. What about anxiety? Can we kind of group them together? Because, I mean, as clinicians, we know that depression and anxiety quite frequently show up hand in hand. They tend to be kind of besties, and you often see one tagging along with the other. But also, it is not impossible that you could have one and not the other. So how would you define anxiety specifically if it were to show up on its own without the child actually being depressed?
Right. So the anxiety disorders is where a person or a child experience a sense of worry, nervousness, without any evidence or significant threats. So their level of nervousness and worry is not seeming to matching the situation that they're engaging with. And it also impairs their functioning. And so that's in general what anxiety is without there being depression. So someone may say, well, that sort of sounds like depression. And like you said, they do kind of go hand in hand in some ways, because if you're experiencing a sense of nervousness and worry most days out of the week, after a while, physically your body tends to wear and tear and you become exhausted. And then that person starts to look like they're depressed, but really their body has just been burning calories. I could go really depth into it. And then they're just tired because they're kind of like they're bottoming out. And then it's just they have no energy and they're exhibiting a sense of depression when just really and truly their mind and their body is just exhausted.
Yeah, they're just depleted. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's put some signs and symptoms out there. Well, you've mentioned some already. Are there any others that a parent should be looking for that you haven't already mentioned? You mentioned already that the exhaustion, the unexplained exhaustion, which comes from the mental drain. You spoke about them being anxious when there is nothing apparently there to be anxious about, and just generally not enjoying life. But is there anything else specific that a parent might notice that could give an indication that there is some clinical depression and maybe anxiety disorder going on in their home?
Yeah. Avoidance, right? So avoiding activities that they normally enjoyed, or even subjects in schools that they were really good at, and suddenly they're just feeling disconnected from it. a sense of irritability and restlessness. We oftentimes hear that, a child may be said to have ADHD when it's really high levels of anxiety that's causing that sense of irritability and restlessness and difficulty to concentrate. Changes in their behavior or their mood that's just very extreme. And so for a teenager, it can be difficult to see because you're like, who is this alien that just walked into my house or walked into my classroom? Because 10 minutes ago, you were all good. And now what is happening? So, we are looking at hormonal changes and the mood shifts, but there's usually very something distinct about when a teen or a child is experiencing significant mood and behavioral changes. So there may be withdrawn, or the teenager starts to become very clingy and attached to their parents, mood swings.
Yeah, yeah. And teenagers who are clingy and attached to their parents is an anomaly. Teenagers do not like their parents usually. So if that is happening, I can totally see how I'd be like, who are you? And what did you do with my child? Because what? Right? Now let's
Therese, if I could add in a little something here, I think also
yes.
too, we notice a decline in them caring for themselves. Like before, they would be very particular about taking care of their bodies and that kind of thing. And if you notice a child has a shift, that all of a sudden they don't want to comb their hair, they're not concerned about bathing properly, etc. I think that's another sign of possible depression.
Yeah, the poor hygiene.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about school. And it's no coincidence that I have educators on the panel here today, because where do our children spend most of their lives? At school with Samista and Zara. So they will only see Serene or myself if something is going wrong with them at school or at home, right? And more often than not, these things are going to be seen first, I believe, at school, because this is where the child is probably interacting most with people. Sometimes when they're home, they're really not interacting very much with their parents. They're home and they're in their rooms, or the parents are at work and they're home alone because they are latchkey children. And so they are, in many instances, the child is spending more time in the 24-hour period with classmates and teachers than they are with their parents. They might only be seeing their parents for an hour in a 24-hour period, like right before they go to bed, or maybe in the morning when they get up before they go to school. So the people who are often most likely to detect that something is off with the child is the teacher, and it may not just be mental health issues, physical health issues too. The teacher is highly likely to be the first person who notices that something is off with the child. So one of the questions that comes to my mind is, are our teachers ready for this responsibility? Because that is a big responsibility. You are there to teach maths and English and art and theater and whatever else. But also, if my child is with you more often than he is with me, I mean, technically you're a pseudo parent. And so I would expect that your eyes would be peeled so that you notice if something is wrong with my child. I'm wondering if this is an unreasonable expectation to place on teachers, and if our teachers are ready for this responsibility.
I think I'll jump in there with that one. You are correct in saying that it is an enormous and impractical responsibility to place on teachers. And I will say this, while most teachers who are teacher trained would have done a psychology course, the psychology course is often limited to the psychology of education and not necessarily mental health. right? So I preface with that to say that, in my personal opinion, I don't believe that a lot of teachers are equipped or prepared or even in the space to deal with a lot of those signs. And, what I would love to see are more professional development seminars where teachers are taught the signs to look out for, and then instead of trying to counsel themselves, the students, they pass that student on to, if not the school counselor, because truth be told, some of the school counselors aren't even equipped to handle those situations either, but pass it on so that persons who are qualified, and I cannot stress that enough, persons who are qualified to effectively deal with these students can indeed connect with them.
Can I just jump in on something that you just said? Because maybe I heard you wrong.
Maybe not.
I think I heard you say that you're not sure the school counselors are ready to handle it either. Did I hear that right?
I'm sorry, is my screen frozen? I didn't stutter. I didn't stutter. Because truth be told, let me tell you, and I have 20 years of experience and observations for me to make that statement.
Wow.
Let me say that I do know that we do have some school counselors who are qualified, who are trained, and who are invested. And then we have some who are just collecting a paycheck. Easily so. Okay? Same with teachers. A lot of persons in our field, in Antigua and Barbuda, see teaching as an interim. I'm going to teach to pay my bills until I can get the bank job I want, until this law firm calls me, until the medical school calls me, whatever. And that is the reality. That is the reality. All right. And I have witnessed situations where school counselors, and I'm not just referring to where I am, just, in speaking with colleagues, interacting with persons from other institutions, you wonder how some persons get that very delicate position to deal with delicate cases and some of the decisions that are made. And I can tell you, to me, one of the issues we've been having is that there seems to be a little disconnect between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Social Transformation. And specifically in terms of family social services, right? And what sometimes happens is that the school counselors believe they can handle certain situations, and FSSD isn't called in until the damage has been done. Sometimes, sadly, irreversible, irreparable damage. So that is just, again, from observation. And as I said, I know we do have some qualified, some trained and very invested counselors, but I don't believe that is the case at every single school. You understand? And I'm going to say kudos to those especially, and I'm deliberately using the word invested. And I want to say kudos to the invested counselors who might get a situation that is more than them, and they have no hesitation with calling in for reinforcement, calling in for a trained professional to either assist or to refer the student to, and just going back to the teachers, because that was the initial question you asked me. They have, they're trying to introduce, or they have begun to introduce, the positive behavioral management. And I know Samista is my deputy, so she can definitely tell you. I've always objected to it in our staff meetings, for sure. because while I think the initiative is a good one, I don't think we're ready for it. I don't think that all the teachers are ready for it. And I say that because I know there are many teachers on island who cannot refrain from in sharing their personal beliefs, whether religious, ethic, moral beliefs. And that's something that you should not ever do with a child, and the ministry, because they're always accepting these UNICEF things that they know they don't train people for, because they themselves are also bullies to us as teachers. But they want us to now introduce these programs in the classrooms. And to me, that's dangerous, because you might have a very overzealous Christian who might make a child even more suicidal than they already are in the classroom. So, yeah, can talk plenty, see? So in a nutshell, no, I don't think we're ready or we're equipped.
So basically, no.
No, it's a
Well, I can agree with Zara to a certain point in that more training is needed, but in terms of recognizing the signs so that you are able to then refer the child to somebody else who is qualified. But I do think if you are an invested teacher and have your students at heart, you would be interested to, if you notice something, that you're able to make an intervention and at least say something to somebody. I really don't believe that teachers are expected to deal with these things themselves, because granted, we are educators, but we're not mental health professionals or anything like that. So I do believe that there should be more training, yes, so that we can recognize if you notice a child starts to behave a certain way, maybe it's something that you should mention to the counselor, and that there's a little investigation or whatever it is. But not for you to actually do something about it, because we are not qualified to do anything about it. But I do believe that we are in a position, all of us, to recognize and alert somebody to what may be happening or something that we notice.
Yeah. Serene, did you want to say something on that? I see. I'm looking at your face.
Serene face, no, guys, no.
I am looking at your face. I'm wondering if you wanted to say something about that.
I agree with Zara. I think it's in New York is the same thing. The social workers in the schools, majority of them are not equipped to provide the level of mental treatment to the students. There aren't enough of supportive counselors in the schools. I know I have evidence of it, that those that are in the schools are not receiving the supervision that they need in order to engage with these students on a clinical level. There's a disconnect between even referring to outpatient mental practices such as myself, or bringing me in. I'm a certified Department of Education vendor. Ask me how many schools has called me in to provide mental counseling. Ask. One. And I'm in New York. And what seems to be the budget item is for these other services, which are great, but that are not tackling the clinical aspect of these children's mental health and wellness. And oftentimes there is, not all schools, but there's this expectation of the teachers to offer a level of support while teaching the students at the same time, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, who gets paid enough to do that? Us as mental professionals, if we encounter a client who is presenting with neurodivergence or TB, some sort of brain injury, we are not going, it's out of our scope of practice to treat this client. We're referring them to a neuropsychologist or a licensed psychologist to get their psychological evaluation and learn a little bit more about what's going on, and then determine whether or not we are appropriate to address this person's right treatment. So the same thing should be for teachers, And in Antigua and Barbuda, that's a whole nother lie. Quite frankly, it's beyond, it's above me. I'm looking at the World Health Organization report on Antigua and Barbuda right now. I've had it for 2020. They say there's 42 social workers. Where they at?
42 social workers in
Sorry,
Antigua.
there are 42 mental health nurses. Sorry, there are 8. I'm going to read it to you. 1 psychiatrist, mental health nurses 8, psychologists 42, social workers 11. Where?
Okay. And these are statistics from 2020?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess that is the question. Where are they?
Yeah. And that's still not enough, right? Because
Yeah.
then you also have to have mental professionals who are trained, experienced in child and adolescent mental health care. That's a whole nother expertise.
Right.
Whether you're doing couples, or if you are trained on persons with psychotic disorders, manic disorders, those are all niches. So the niches
Yeah.
in child and adolescent mental health care is completely different. So what percentage of those mental professionals are experienced on that? Even for myself, who has over 20 years experience, I still take continued education to make sure that my, treatment modalities are evolving along with the new generation and the way that the world is functioning.
Yeah. Absolutely. And as you said, a broader conversation about the mental health landscape, specifically as it pertains to school-age children, that's a whole other podcast. We would have to go live on another day at another time if we're going to unpack that. So we're not even going to dig any further into that. But just to acknowledge that there is absolutely a conversation that needs to be had about that, and perhaps we can come back and have that conversation another day. But let's circle back to the topic we want to focus on, which is the anxiety and the depression. And I want to ask a question about social contagion. So this is a phenomenon in the field of psychology that some people don't really buy into. Some people. While there are some of us who totally believe in it because we see the evidence. And social contagion is basically a principle that suggests that people can catch attitudes, mindsets, behaviors, just as the word contagion suggests, because it is contagious from coming in contact with people who behave certain ways and who have specific mindsets and schools of thought that are prevalent, and you hanging around them a lot could cause you to begin to adapt to their behaviors and their thought patterns as well. This is essential. That's just a broad definition of what social contagion is. And research suggests that adolescents and school-age children are prone to social contagion because they are more susceptible to, peer pressure and peer influence and social media and those types of things. And these are the places where social contagion are most likely to occur. So I'm wondering, do you think that children feeding off of each other's energy has an impact on depression and anxiety?
For sure.
For sure.
Definitely.
I was able, we have this deputy principals exchange program. And so I was at a different school. So this is not high school that I'm talking about. And I was there for a longer time than the original time when the program started. And there were these 2 girls in particular. One was very prone to having anxiety attacks and that kind of thing. And the principal mentioned to me that when she's having a panic attack or whatever it is, we have to then be mindful and watchful for her best friend, because very soon after, she then gets this attack. And their philosophy or their belief was that because they are so close to one another, they do everything together, have lunch together, they're in the same classes, etc., that it's a case of it kind of like being contagious. So I was actually able to witness one of those episodes while I was there. So it was actually the first time that I've experienced anything like that, even though I would have heard about it before. So I totally believe that it is possible and real.
Yeah. Serene, what is that facial expression? Tell me what's going on in your mind.
I don't really, I've heard of it. It hasn't stuck with me. I do believe that a child can be impacted by the culture of their school, their classroom, and their peers. That as children and adolescents, we more times want to connect with our peers. So there may be a sense of mimicking certain behaviors in order to be a part of that circle. But when I'm engaging with these adolescents and when I do have the opportunity to go to these schools, I'm able to see very unique personality and characteristics, even though they are within their circle. So, I don't know these two friends, but it could very well be, and I've never heard a child, I don't know how often this child experience panic disorders, but that's a whole nother topic. But if they are close friends and one child is not equipped to support their friends, I would say naturally is going to influence some level of anxiety if that friend feels responsible to take care of them. So even though they may be exhibiting the same things, it may be for different reasons. Because a panic disorder is not something that just happens out of the blue. As you know, Dr. Joseph, it happens because either this person has I'm going to use the chronic anxiety, and has experienced a distressful life event or typically trauma that causes a panic disorder. A panic attack is like almost having an out-of-body experience. It's almost like you're feeling detached from yourself. So for someone to tell me that their friend experienced that same thing, I would tell you, no, I don't believe that. I believe the friend may have experienced a portion of anxiety, a heightened level of anxiety, because they feel this unknowingly sense of responsibility for their friend, and or that they're finding a way to connect to them, but it's not the same thing. I'm not staying on business.
On that. Yeah. Sorry, what was that?
No, I just said I stand on business when I say that, because I hear people talking about this contagion. I'm like,
yeah, it really is controversial. It is a controversial thing. A lot of varying points of view and schools of thought where it comes to social contagion. Not just in terms of mental health issues. I mean, I think the social contagion idea did start with the spread of behaviors and attitudes, but the ideology has advanced since then, and people also talk about social contagion having to do with the spread of ideas and the spread of the lifestyles, and so I don't know I don't know where it begins and where it ends necessarily. But I tell you what I have seen. What I have seen is a lot of what Samista described. Right? How we go about explaining it, I think, is what matters. I have in the past, as a teacher, many moons ago, seen what people refer to as social contagion playing out on a school compound. I think perhaps referring to it, perhaps the name that has been attached to it, perhaps it is the label that is problematic. Maybe that is the problem. And the label may be problematic because it is a label that suggests that whatever happened to that first child is what is happening to the other children.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not necessarily be the case. What happens to the first child is probably the clinical issue. The children who are appearing to catch it contagiously may be, as Serene described, just feeling a sense of concern or responsibility towards that first child. And as a result, the behaviors are mimicked. That could very well be it.
But let me add this
And we
too.
refer to that as contagion.
But let me add this too. It's also part of development, social development, right? So, like, it just came to me like sun-in. Does anyone remember the sun-in?
The
I
one?
don't know. Well, I don't know how old. Well, there used to be this thing called sun-in when you would spray it on your hair and it would make your hair blonde.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I know my mom was pissed off that I did it, but all of my friends were doing something because it started to break off my hair, so I nearly bald right here because I'm spraying and spraying. So I'm just using something that's very simple, right? So,
Right.
a lot of us wanted the blonde streak. We didn't have to go to the hair salon to do it. We just spray the sun in, and you go in the sun, and the more you go in the sun, the more blonder, it will get. Now, something as simple as that, you want to identify with your peers, right? And then you start to do things, even and say that you like it, even if maybe you don't really like it, but it makes you connected to them. And so for the children now, we're experiencing this heightened level of anxiety. It is further reinforced by being flooded with a lot of these images on social media and digital devices. And maybe not, I feel it is not being challenged by the natural supports like their parents, right? It's not being replaced. So there aren't any boundaries or timeframes in which you can engage with it. So if you are engaging with your peers in school and then you hop on this WhatsApp group chat or whatever, and they're being toxic in that group chat, yes, socially and developmentally, you're going to start to exhibit similar behaviors as the others because there's never any ending to it. It is constant. Whereas for us, when we came home, there was no group chat. If someone called me on the phone and my parent was home, they were on the phone. It was a busy signal. So there were things that sort of, it set boundaries for that. And I had to wait the next day. Now, I'm not saying that we need to go back to that. We're in the 21st century. It is what it is. But there needs to be some level of awareness where other parties, parents, when they have the opportunity to sort of disrupt that, if you will. So I don't know about this contagion thing. Maybe I will next month. I don't know, but I'm not there.
I gotta say, I'm gonna more agree.
Yeah, no,
with
I don't think
Therese?
I don't think it's gonna be different next month.
No, in terms of the term might be the issue, because I don't look at it as a contagion, and I'm gonna go totally grassroots with my next term and say that I see it as follow fashion. I see it more as a follow fashion to socialize, to fit in, rather than it being like contagion. When I think of contagion, I think of the movie Contagion. I think of the coronavirus,
And possibly that you can't avoid it. It's
right?
something that you will catch. If yeah.
So to me, so I'm going to agree that the terminology might be a problem, but listening to what all three of you are describing from your observations, from your studies and stuff like that, to me, a good old fashioned follow fashion suit. You have the one, or for lack of a better, for let's use the contagion terminologies, you have patient zero, who actually does have something serious going on. And I don't know why, but it seems like patient zero always has some sort of negative and toxic leadership hold or magnetism about them. And then you get their minions now that are going to follow patient zero's fashion. And if not follow it, to mimic their experience or emotions, they're going to in my opinion, develop a full sense of empathy. And to me, that is what what I see happening in some cases. For a simple example, Therese doesn't like Serene. Therese doesn't like Serene for whatever issue. Misty and I are friends with Therese. She's pretty cool. If she says Serene not in good ways, Misty and I are now gonna be with Therese, bullying Serene, ignoring Serene, spreading propaganda around Serene, even though Serene has never done anything to us. But it makes Therese treat us good, and we want Therese's approval. Even though Therese whatless around the place, smoking crack behind the bathroom, she looks cool.
Yeah.
So I see this follow fashion. They can coin it and call it follow fashionism.
Follow fashionism.
I just want to say with the term contagious, what speaks to me, when they come up with these terms, it's like the adults that are responsible don't want to be held accountable.
Ooh,
that's why it upsets me. You know what I'm saying? Because here you go, science, and it ain't Black people. I'm gonna keep it 100 that's coming up with this. We're not saying no, come on. Like, who's using these terms to support certain systems that you're developing or not developing, where you as adults need to change the system? So here you come with this social contagious business. Like, it's always been the case, it's just evolved. Like, when just the very thing that Zara just shared. I remember when I was in school, there were girls that bullied me, and I never had any interaction with these people. But because such and such says she don't like me because of the way I dress, and I think I'm better than people, you didn't like me. But guess what? Me and them is friends on Facebook. We're 50 years old, and back then, you didn't like me, and you don't even know why you didn't like me. That is what's happening. But the systems that feed have not evolved, but everyone else has. And now you come with this social contagious business. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important because I love the accountability that you're using there. I think that too needs to be something that those of us who have direct contact with these teenagers, that's something we also need to be looking out for, so we can help to cut that, make the children aware, bring them to a sense of awareness where they're not perpetrating that. Yeah. Where they actually like, oh my gosh, for real, I have no problem with Serene. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
I don't have this issue with my mother. Why am I creating it? I don't have this issue with my grandfather. Why am I creating it? I don't have this issue with this adult. I don't have this issue with this particular teenage friend. Why am I creating it?
Yeah. I'm gonna take it a step further, and I'm gonna say that I believe that the term that they're using, it really is the terminology that I have a real issue with. I do not like that they use the word contagion in the term. I feel like there is another way that they could describe this phenomenon without using the word contagion. That is my major issue with it. But what I wanted to add to what Zara just said, and also to what Serene said, is that I think that it does not just relieve the adults of accountability. I think it also relieves the children of a certain amount of responsibility as well. Because if we are advancing this idea that you can catch things from your friend, a child will internalize this and will proceed to mimic the behaviors of their friends and then say, this is why it happened.
Like a pregnancy pact.
It's not I couldn't help myself. It happened to her, and then I was there, so it happened to me. I have no control over my behavior. I am no longer responsible for regulating my emotions or regulating my body or anything or what I say. You know what I mean? And so I feel like it's relieving. It certainly is relieving the adults of some responsibility for sure. But I feel like it also, to some extent, is giving our children, especially our teenagers, a blind to behave in certain ways, and then have this strange explanation for it that
You know what
doesn't
is
necessarily
a
make
contagion?
sense.
You know what is a contagion? This gentle parenting crap. That is a contagion. Because
Zara.
apologetic here. Yeah, this gentle parenting crap is a contagion. This lack of discipline, this entitlement, because we're creating children with low self-esteem. It's like two ends of the spectrum. They either have extremely low self-esteem, or they are chronic attention seekers to the detriment of themselves and all around them. The children, in turn, because you're saying the adults have no accountability, the adults then are teaching children how not to have any accountability. And we can say, it's not my fault, it's this contagion. Now the Antiguan granny might say, what contagion? You just follow fashion, dog, you know? And we need some more of them grassroots parenting to come back in. We need more consequences and just to wake a child up. You know, it was so interesting. And today has been a theme for me. I was on Point FM earlier this afternoon with Abina St. Luce and Louis, with some young people who just graduated from different schools across the island, you know, basically talking about what the next step was. And one of the young men, he shared his story that he definitely, when he started school, he was a troublemaker, you know, following the wrong crowd. And it was his father. His father threatened to throw him out the house. You're going to either continue school, you're going to pull up your socks, you're going to do what you need to do, or you're going to get out. And guess what? Young man ended up becoming deputy head boy. And if you listen to him talk, if you know, and I'm sure it's on Facebook that you can play it back, he sounds so sure in what lies ahead for him in his future. You know what I mean? And I think that's the type of parenting that we also need to see coming back in, because if your child is going to eventually, what's it, there's a meme, if you keep excusing your child's bad behavior, you're going to end up needing to find a lawyer for them in adulthood or something like that. You know, again, this is not in any way to say that some of our children do not have actual mental health issues, but we also need to be mindful that we're not creating a false sense of mental illness, where what it really is attention seeking and entitlement and a lack of discipline.
But that brings back to where we would need that training to recognize the genuine signs of depression and these things, so that we are able to be more discerning when it comes to these matters. Because it's a very thin line, because I encounter many students who appear to be depressed or may seem very anxious, but then when you really investigate, they are seeking attention.
Because but you see what you said there? When you investigate, because I was just going to talk about observation.
Yep.
I think it's also important to know, I mean, from a clinician, to know, why are you seeking attention? What is the why? We know what they're doing. You know, why are you seeking attention? There is a reason. There's a reason why you lack boundaries. There's a reason why you're impulsive. There's a reason why your behavior is the way that it is. And it could be a combination of many things. But in the end, there's an adult there somewhere. So whether it's the teacher who's receiving training surrounding these mental health, which is important for them to have the professional development, as well as the parents as well. I mean, the gentleman, I didn't hear the interview, but there was something that must have clicked for the dad that said, I need to I have to set some boundaries here with this child because he's on the wrong path. So there's something different that the father did. Let's not forget that, right?
Mhm.
And so that has set the tone for this child, thank God. And it doesn't happen with all children. And so I don't subscribe to gentle parenting either. You never see it in any of my posts. I'm I'm like, I don't know what that is. The parent. When people are like, oh, that's my best friend, I'm like, where? Are you telling them your bills?
Girl.
Your intimacy? That is not your best friend. You have a wonderful relationship with your child. Very nice. But they ain't your friend. And I need you to stop saying that. And I hope parents are hearing me because it burns me up to hear them say that. Any parent that engages with me therapeutically, y'all know. Like, say what? And you are the authoritative parent. There's the authoritarian and there's the authoritative. And you see yourself as the head. You see yourself as the decision maker who's supporting this child and like sort of nurturing, right? These attributes. And allowing them to fail in a sense, to learn, but not fail in a sense, oh, well, you're going to go do it. And if it works out, it works out. It doesn't, it doesn't. Then you're coming back in with some information. And if you don't have it, you say you don't have it. Right. So you say, yes, I believe in this. A well parent raises a well child. And you see the shift. When the parent shifts, the child shifts. I would say it happens. I haven't seen any clients of mine with the parent shift and the child shift. It always happens. And there's an adult. These adults need to, like, in all spaces, whether you're in, politics, you're in NGOs, you're in the educational system, you're in mental health, physical health, we have a responsibility to start to shift.
Right.
Well, you said something that is so, I think so important. And of course, please, from your and Therese, especially from your professional backgrounds, weigh in on my next statement. Because I am seeing a correlation and you coined it nicely just now as well. Would you say that, and I'm just calling a random statistic here, would you say 9 out of 10 times, a lot of the cases of depression and anxiety we see in our students can be traced back to a connection with a parent or parental figure?
Yes.
I'm going to say yes on that. And if I'm going to give a purely clinical response, I would have to begin with the fact that a parent who is depressed or anxious
passes it down
is a risk factor. that would have to be the first thing that I say. If I am a parent who is anxious or depressed, that is a risk factor. That's a huge risk factor for my child or children, right? Because parents who are anxious and depressed will raise children who are anxious and depressed. So yes, there is absolutely a connection. And then we could keep going down the line. I will let Serene speak more about it. But yes, it is absolutely, it's probably outside of organic issues, because that also can be a cause of anxiety and depression. The brain is an organ, just like the lungs and the kidneys and the other organs in your body. And in the same way that other organs can sometimes malfunction and not do what they have to, and we have to step in and tweak a little bit and maybe administer a little medication or something like that, that can also happen to the brain. It is an organ. And so sometimes we might have an under-secretion or an over-secretion of neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are the chemicals that are secreted by our brains, and that can alter our behavior. They can disrupt our moods and create conditions like anxiety and depression. And so sometimes it's an organic issue, which can be genetic as well. Let me throw that in. But outside of the organics, if you are in a home with a parent who is anxious or depressed, I am not shocked. I would never be shocked if you end up with anxiety and depression as well. That was a very long-winded start to that response.
Everything that you said, right? So if you're in a house with a parent where there's certain situations or distressful situations, divorce, separation, a child who has different caregivers that is frequently changing, sometimes things are beyond the parents' control. So I don't want the parents to feel like this is a beat up on you, right? But just having an awareness about what's happening in the household, that it does impact your child and predisposes them to exacerbation or worsening of these symptoms if
Right.
they're amongst their friends who are, exhibiting these impulsivities, if they're in a toxic school culture, because I see that a lot up here where parents are sending their children to predominantly all white schools, and these children are faced with all types of microaggression and racism, whether it's by their teachers or their peers. So that only influences this all, that sort of anxiety that's already kind of residing there, right? Along with the racial trauma, any trauma that they experience. And so I've never encountered a child who exhibited a certain behavior and didn't see their parent there. When I'm providing and when my staff is providing clinical treatment to the child, I always let them know the parent is right behind them. You have to, when you are treating the child, you are treating the parent also.
Right.
That's a lot of work.
Yes. Yeah. And it's on your shirt. It's on your shirt.
Yeah.
A well parent raises a well child. Don't sleep on that. Don't sleep on that statement, because that is real. That's real life right there. And that is a whole other podcast as well.
But on the flip side, can I ask this though? Because on the flip side, so we look at, as you said, the connection there to the parent in the sense of, mimicking or passing down what the parent experiences. But do we have cases where the child develops depression or anxiety as a response to what is happening at home? And let me give you an example, because and I continue to see this even with myself. So let me use me as an example. I used to get bullied a lot at school and stuff, and I had to develop the personality that most of you have come to know me as, where I'm speaking up for myself because I didn't have people speaking up for me. I became an advocate because I felt like I didn't have anybody, advocating for me. So I have that very assertive, I'm not afraid to say whatever personality. No. My child. And I remember when she came to high school, so she actually had to deal with being at the school her mom teaches at. And I remember she doesn't look anything like me. So that's the first thing. And I remember it just kept happening all the time in the staff room at different levels that she was, teachers realizing who my daughter was. And they're like, what? She's so quiet. She's so sweet. She's non-confrontational. Are you sure they didn't switch babies? Yes, I'm sure. It was just me and her up at Adeline. So, and I've had to step back from pushing her. And I've had colleagues even tell me, again, at different levels throughout her education, they've had to remind themselves that she's not me. They'll get a project from her. She denies me the privilege of helping. And, they're like, I was expecting to see this splash of color and vibrancy and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I had to remind myself, she's her own person. And I'm like, yeah, she's her own person. I help when she asks. So I don't know if that's a thing as well, where she's just really quiet, although she has come out of her shell a lot. And I've noticed it even when some of the theater kids join my drama club. I've had to speak to a few parents, and I have closed rehearsals. I don't normally invite parents inside to watch my rehearsals, right? Because they're going to start co-directing and, with the child and stuff like that. And I have noticed that some of the parents with very bold, flamboyant, loud personalities, their children are very, very shy. And I've had to tell them, leave her. And she may never end up on stage, but she might be the best stage manager I have, or she might be the best front of house manager that I have. Leave her, let her come into their own, And so, can it be that sometimes the children develop these issues as a response rather than mimicking or aligning with what the parent had?
I'm here's how I will respond to that question. I once heard a quotation. I don't know where I read it. I do not recall. I just know that the quote stuck with me and has been with me for many years. And the quote says, "Depression is often the result of an unexpressed soul."
Mm-hmm.
When I first read it, I don't think it resonated as deeply with me as it does now. I think it has grown on me more and more over the years as I myself have evolved, both as a clinician and also just as a human, and have come on my own to recognize that inauthenticity in one's life does indeed produce depression. It does.
I like that.
Not being afforded the opportunity to just show up as the most authentic version of yourself. I do not, and this is as a clinician, as a professional, I do not see how that wouldn't produce depression on some level. It may not be a severe, major depressive disorder. You may just become a high functioning depressive,
Mm-hmm.
but you will not be a person who is living a healthy, functional life. There is going to be some kind of low-lying depression existing somewhere in your subconscious because you do not know what it is to be yourself. How can this not depress a person? I don't know how. How would a human brain survive this without becoming depressed? That is wild. And so I believe that yes, a child who is being overwhelmed by a parent who decides to live vicariously through them is going to become depressed. And this is so normalized in our society, where our parents decide, or the parents of our children decide, the lives that the child should live. And the life that they want the child to live is the life that the parent never lived and really always wanted to. Or alternatively, it might be the life that the parent is currently living and believes with all of their heart that their child will be happiest if they just recycle the life that their parent is living. And the child has absolutely zero interest or desire or willingness to do so, and is actually being pushed backed into a corner to make them do it because they have no choice, because they are the child, right? I believe this is what Adler, I don't know how familiar you are with Adlerian psychology, but I believe this is what Adler calls interference and not understanding one's own task as compared to the task of another human. And that other human might be your child. My task and your task, just because you are my child, are not one and the same. I did not come here. I am not here earthside to do the same thing that my child is here to do. And I must be respectful of that. And whatever my child came earthside to do might be completely opposite to what I came to do. And my role as a parent is to figure out what that child came earthside to do and nurture and support that. Even if it looks nothing like what I would have envisioned my child doing. that is what we are to do when we have chosen to engage in the act of parenting, right? Another long-winded answer to C, Zara. Yes, yes. That would absolutely
Can be
depress
a
a child.
response as well.
Yes. Yeah. And I see Auntie Heather in the chat chiming in. Auntie Heather says, totally agree. Not being able to be authentically you can lead to depression. Yeah, I believe that with all of my heart. I believe it.
And
Authenticity.
what Zara, what you
important.
shared, that happens a lot. I see that a lot, where a parent is looking at their child's lives through their lens and not their child. And try to get the parents to see it through their eyes.
Because I'm telling you, I had to practice a lot of self-awareness. I know I didn't get it right 10 out of 10 times, but I had to practice a lot of self-awareness as well and realize that my child is probably never going to be an actor. But and I mean, to this day, right now, it's a running joke in the house, among friends, among colleagues, people that know her. If you ask this child to go and give a speech, to perform a role with lines, it ain't gonna happen. But ask her to dance. Ask her to dance. Even at the last minute, and it's a favor for a friend, family friend, something she can do, she will light up that stage. So I was like, hey, at least I got her on stage. But yeah, it takes some self-awareness as well. And I would say to any parents listening, it is kind of hard because, especially if you were bullied as a child, you don't want your child to feel that. And I've had to learn to trust the things I did as a young parent, the things I did in her formative years. I had to trust that I helped to build her self-esteem, even in accepting the things I didn't want, even in accepting her no. One of the hardest things for me as a parent is for when my child tells me no. Oh, I think you should enter this pageant. No, mommy. I think you should go out for this role. No, mommy. I think you'd look really pretty in this dress. No, mommy. I've had to accept her no's. And let me tell you, especially when she got to secondary school, one of the most prideful moments I had as a parent was when I had to go to the office, was called to the office. Why was I called to the office? Because my child put a member of the ancillary staff in her place. The lady was teasing another student, younger student, about her weight, and my child told the adult, stop it, you don't speak to people like that, you don't know how this child is feeling. And so of course the cleaner took her to the office, and I'm telling you, I was so proud. And I'm like, I'm sorry. She said, what to you? What? Like, for real? And after the pride went, I was like, well, she right. Why are you talking about that child like that? And I realized, okay.
So the staff member thought the child was going to get into trouble.
Yeah.
And I'm like, her body shaming the student.
And I'm like, my child standing up for somebody else, speaking out, scolding an adult. I cannot tell you how much pride I felt. And like that for me was such a defining moment, because it may help me to also just relax a lot and trust that she has her own way. She'll be fine. Mm-hmm. She will speak up when she needs to. And more so when she needs to for someone else. And that just filled me with so much pride as a parent, because we all know, even at our age, one of the hardest things for us to do is speak out against the ill treatment of other persons. Mm-hmm. So parents, if your child isn't following in your footsteps, especially when they don't look like you, but give them the support they need. They will come into their own. And as I said, even being in the drama club, I see it all the time. Children who come in so shy, so shy, and by you give them a few years and they come out of the shell, on their own. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see when the children can come into themselves. And as you said, they find themselves, they find their purpose. And even more beautiful when you can see the support system they have behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to highlight another comment or two. Another comment here from Auntie Heather saying that as well as trying to live up to other persons or parents' high expectations can lead to depression. I agree with that wholeheartedly too. And I have another comment, just this the last one that I will bring up from Pamela saying that's correct. So many parents also want their children to do something they wanted to become. That is very, very common as well. And I like I said, I believe I already said that. I believe that these people become depressed, sometimes high functioning depression, but they are depressed nonetheless. And perhaps one of these days I should do a podcast on high functioning depression as well, because we need to understand that depression does not have a look. It has a variety of different faces. Sometimes it does look like that one face that is very popular on social media and pop culture, the person who is sad and struggling to engage in their regular day-to-day activities, the person who cannot get out of bed, the person who is always crying, the person who is suicidal, and so on. That is the face of depression that is often portrayed by popular culture. But I need people to know that that is only one of the faces of depression. Depression has several faces.
Yeah. Can you segue into that for teenagers? Because I know one of the things that we often miss as educators is the aggression, the anger, the deviant behavior. And sometimes that is a clear-cut sign of depression in teenagers. Can you just elaborate on that?
Yeah, anger is the surface.
Really, let's take that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, anger is the surface, as you mentioned. So you see a lot of irritability, anger, and aggression, and either that person is, they are aggressive, they're violent, and the underlying thing behind that or underneath that is a lot of depression. And when I say a lot of depression, meaning that is intense to the point where they don't know what else to do. And you oftentimes will see that in, how do I say this, traditional male gender borns, where you see anger oftentimes, but they're dealing with severe depression underneath. And haven't been given an opportunity or a space to sort of sift out what is going on emotionally, and or have a space even at home where they can express themselves and it be validated. And that's probably what's happening from a very early age. So it's not like they woke up and then they just started being aggressive. It happened in stages. My theoretical belief is that anxiety is like the mother, it's like the foundation of all mental health diagnosis. And so this child more than likely had experience in struggling with anxiety. And then as they've gotten older, you would start to see depression coming in. A younger child can experience depression, but it's usually a bit more milder until pubescent stage. So you're looking like at 8, 9, and 10. And then you would start to see bouts of depression where there's sadness. They may tell someone that they're not feeling happy. They may use I'm feeling sad, or I don't want to do this. And it's just being disregarded as you're lazy, you don't want to do this, or the parent may not have the emotional bandwidth to engage with it. And then as
Right.
they get older and they're in your classroom or in their school and they're 13, 14, 15, and 16, you start to see a lot of aggressive and anger outbursts from them. But behind that, there may be self-cutting where they may be cutting into their arm. They may be self-punching themselves in their thighs and their inner arms because these areas are more sensitive, and a lot of our nerve endings seem to be accessible here. And so in male gender borns, there's more self-cutting than people realize. A lot of people think that it's only in girls, but there are a lot of male teenagers that are doing that. And so it's unfortunate that a lot of these teens are not afforded an opportunity to enter into spaces where they can process a lot of those emotions and manage those anger behavior, those aggressions and that anger that they have towards people that they're perceiving. Either there's a sense of inadequacy. A lot of times that's what's happening with them. The bullies, a lot of times, people see the bullies, and the bullies are usually the persons with the lowest self-esteem and projecting and attempting to project that onto their peers. I can go on and on, but I know we're running out of time. Because I think about when clients come to me and the parents are like, oh, they're doing this and they're getting in trouble, and we're getting them when it's severe and that the school can't take it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then they are with us and they're appearing on screen and they don't want to be there. And then 6 months down the line, we can't get them out of the session because they got so much to talk about. Right. And so they're afforded the opportunity to process a lot of those thoughts and emotions and have a lot of those thoughts and emotions validated and how they're being treated in different areas of their lives.
And can I just add to that, especially for the parents that might be listening or the parents that will rewatch this, don't beat yourself up. Don't be so hard on yourself that you miss an opportunity to help your child and even help yourself. I know I'm probably not calling the correct name. I know we have a parent-child intervention center in Antigua. I think it's part of FSSD. It's an intervention center. I can't remember the exact title of it, but I do know some households who have benefited from that intervention process, who have been able to find a way for the parent and the child to communicate openly and effectively, to move forward, to progress towards healing themselves and their relationships. So we do have effective programs in Antigua. To me, the challenge is getting there and not feeling that we can handle it on our own if we're not equipped to.
Yeah.
And of course, you have to be open as a parent that if your child is crying out, if your child is acting out, if your child can get help, that you are able to provide that environment for them to heal as well as yourself, and don't look at it as, a failure on your part.
Yeah. I think that might be the one of, not the only, certainly, but one of the biggest hurdles that parents have to jump over in order to access services for their children is the guilt that they often feel. And just that internal narrative that is saying to them that they would have failed as a parent because their child is showing symptoms of mental health disorders of some kind. It is not a failure in parenting. You certainly would not consider a malfunction of the kidneys as a failure in parenting. If you discover that your child has a heart condition, you would never link that to poor parenting. And in the same way, I would discourage you from linking an issue impacting the brain to poor parenting, right? it may have absolutely nothing at all to do with it. And so, I think that guilt is a hurdle that a lot of parents never really manage to jump over and access the services that their children need. And then, of course, there are the stereotypes attached to having a child that has been diagnosed with a mental health disorder or a learning disability or any of the other things that we consider to be embarrassing to our families, and that's yet another hurdle. And you know what I think is another hurdle to having our children access the services they need when they need them? That same contagious issue that Zara mentioned earlier, thinking that gentle parenting is going to fix it. I can love you out of it. I can love the child out of whatever it is that is happening to them. If I lower the bar of discipline a little bit and befriend my child more, or whatever it is that they attempt to do without the professional intervention, I think that is also a barrier that we need to get parents to move past. You cannot parent your child out of depression. You need intervention. That is not how it works. And so, yeah, that's it. I'm gonna stop there. I see Serene waiting to jump in. Carry on.
No,
I had a question for Serene, though. I'm driving, so I'm not on camera, ladies. But Serene, you spoke about the cutting with
yeah.
the children. Is that something that falls into the follow fashion, as we call it, as well? Or are those cases like genuine situations of depression, anxiety, some sort of problem?
I find it as I don't call it follow fashion. I call it learned behavior, right? So whether or not, and so I just want to clarify that cutting has been going around. I'm 50 years old, and people when I was in high school were self-cutting. No one talked about it. That's why we're under this impression that this is suddenly some new thing. It's been going on for so long. Even if anyone knows Salt and Pepper, the rap group, I think a lot of people know that, right? Pepper talks about, there's a documentary where she talks about that she used to cut into her 20s. She was cutting. And so I just want to clarify that this isn't anything new. You're just learning about it for probably the first time. And there are people that are watching or people that know who were cutting at when we were younger. And so it has become learned behavior. Because in order to cut into your skin, there has to be something there mentally that allows you to do that, because it is painful. If you get a paper cut, we all know that thing is like someone stomped on my big toe. It is so painful. So to actually cut into your forearm and into your thighs, or using fire to burn yourself, I know you know what you're doing, but why? Why are you doing that? Because usually you're cutting in isolation. Now if they're cutting together, in a room somewhere, it's like, what? This is not self-cutting.
What
else going
is
on.
this? What?
I'm not saying this happened. I'm just saying when you talk about, there are things that they do together, but I haven't heard about self-harming. But if you're doing this together, then that's something else, right? Because when I think about follow fashion and all of that, I think about you all are doing it together, or you're telling one another, hey, I'm doing this, right? So that's something else. But self-harming is when someone has sort of dissociated, and it's not a mental diagnosis, when they've sort of disconnected from their bodies and they're numb, and that these intense emotions are coming out in a way for them to reconnect with themselves and cope with those intense emotions of depression, anxiety, and any other brewing mental health diagnosis. I hope that answered the question. Oh, so Mrs.
Can
driving.
yeah, shit, semester is driving. So, um, I want to ask another question, kind of segueing a little tiny bit. But can very young children get anxiety and
Mhm.
depression? Like what age ranges are we looking at? Because we have called the program anxiety and depression in school aged children, but you understand that that is a huge window,
Yeah.
uh, starting all the way from age 4 and ranging all the way up to 18. So how young are we looking at people, at children, sorry, being diagnosed with anxiety and depression?
So usually, younger than I've seen children unfortunately be diagnosed with ADHD at age 2, which I don't agree with. So when they're younger, believe it or
Hmm.
not, you are diagnosing the parent in order typically to diagnose the child. So when you're looking at an infant who is past the age or stages of being colic, who's crying profusely, not eating as well. There's no anatomical issue as to why they're not able to eat or take their bottle, and the treatment is with the parent. So there are different hospitals here that have outpatient services where they're seeing that the child is restless and is not able to soothe themselves, but they're treating the parent in order to treat the child. Then as they get older, the child gets older to 2 or 3, they're in school at 2. Some are in school at baby because they call it baby university. And you're starting to see that, yeah, up here we have in Harlem and different places, we have things called baby university. Um, so they're in school, right? And so you have to think about, there's a device that's being put in front of this baby. They're laying down or they're propped up, and the parent puts the device in front of them, and all these different images are coming at them, and they're supposed to be learning their ABCs at a very early age, and their 1 2 3s, and languages. They're even having them French and Spanish. So the brain is getting all of this information, right? So what happens as they get older? So if I give that as an example, you're probably like, that sounds pretty overwhelming for that young brain, right? And so the child could definitely experience anxiety because the parent, again, wants their child to have maybe the education that they didn't have. They want them to be smart, be advanced, and really projecting and have these high expectations for the child that maybe just genetically they're not ready to engage with just yet.
Mhm.
And that in itself can cause a certain high levels of anxiety in a very young child. Then you have the child that may be born into certain situations with this intimate partner violence. When you just think about climate, right? So when you think about natural disasters, hurricanes, displacement,
Mhm.
parent separation, different parental figures, culturally. When I was younger, you had the granny. Granny would take care of you while the parent may have went off, and maybe they were working in someone's home, or they worked in another island and then they came back. That, even with the parent's best intention, the disconnect from the parent child bond can cause a level of anxiety as well. And so yeah, sorry, Zara, you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to ask, what does the anxiety look like in at that young age? Toddlers, let's say between age 5 and 8. What does anxiety present as in that age group?
So if you're looking at generalized anxiety disorder, it can look like a lot of worry that something bad is going to happen to their parent, the person who's their primary caregiver. Something bad is going to happen when I go to school. Um, you may have separation anxiety where they don't want to part ways from their parent. You may start to see bedwetting when they're past the pamper stage and they're independently going to the bathroom. You may see urine incontinence where they're peeing on themselves as they go to school. You may even see constipation and like a lot of pain in the stomach, because the gut is attached to the brain. So there may be constipation or frequent bowel movements. Children who have difficulty sleeping at night. Children who's like jumpy, like they hear a noise and they're startled. So the auditory sounds, they're hypersensitive to auditory sounds. They may be even hypersensitive to touches. So they're not like people touching them or in their immediate space. You may see anxiety there. You may see a child who really struggles with going into new environments. So if they're going to school and they're going home, they usually don't want to go to something else that's different or that requires them to transition and shift. Now, I'm not talking about the child. Sorry, parents. We are signing them up for 4 or 5 different activities: guitar, piano, football, language, and they have all of these activities going on. And that's very nice. I'm very happy that you can do that, but it's not for every child. So you have to remember that this child is developing socially by their peers. So if you have them in 4 different groups, that means 4 different sets of new friends that they have to learn how to socialize in different environments. That can be very overwhelming for a child. And you may see some children that function well in it, but they don't have good attachment styles. So when they get older and they're starting to form friendships in the teenage years, you start to see that they're having difficulties with forming attachments because they never really learned how to do that in a successful environment where there was 1 or 2 groups of their peers.
Yeah, that's good. Another thing that just came to me, in addition to what you have already listed, and you gave quite a comprehensive list there, I thought of parasomnias that could also result from anxiety. Night terrors, nightmares, even sleepwalking, and other types of parasomnias that could result from a very young child with anxiety, who probably does not yet have the language to describe to you what they are experiencing. It could manifest itself in sleep disorders, of various kinds as well.
And so, like, I'm not identifying a client, so I'll just give a mush of different symptoms that I've seen that maybe or not, it wasn't in one client. So clients, children who are self-inducing vomiting so that they don't have to go to school. Now someone like, oh, they're rude, they don't want, but if they are so adverse to going to school that they're willing to inflict regurgitation on themselves, like you mentioned, Therese, child who has insomnia, who wakes up in night terrors, who gives you very vivid dreams, like it's almost like a movie. And it's amazing that they remember everything that happened, because usually the memory bank of a child is not expansive, right? So when they're in session with us and they're like giving all these details about what happened, and we're trying to put the pieces together, because now I'm speaking with the parent and asking them what were their early experiences. And what sometimes we find is that even at 1 or 2, that there was a trauma experience, that the memories are attaching themselves to their dream, and they're coming in forms of like very big spiders, of everything that are very scary. And sometimes these are actual individuals who have morphed into so I'll just end there because I can go on and on.
I do have a follow-up question, if you don't mind. What for, especially with the night terrors, what can a parent of a toddler do in a situation with night terrors to help the toddler?
So I know typically the children with night terrors want to go into the parent's bed. And so that's very common. And you want to start off by offering calming methods while they're in your bed. I will not tell the parent, don't have the child come into your bed. That's not helpful. But you can start to engage in meditation, deep breathing, and books, reading. Um, a lot of times when you start to read, your brain usually is drifting to the characters or whatever's going on in the book, and it really can help one calm. So begin to do that if the child is climbing into your bed, and take stages where you're taking them to their bed. Usually they will wake up and come back into the room. Some parents will like, I lay a mattress next to my bed because I really want this child to feel safe and reassured that they're safe in their bedroom. Also, the parents, I ask them about what methods are you taking to calm yourself, because we can see a lot of that anxiety even in the parents. It just looks different. And so it takes a lot of consistency and trial and error. There is no one way to do it. Definitely avoid the iPad. A lot of times parents will give in to the iPad, but the child ends up going underneath their covers and they're on the iPad to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then when they reach school, they're tired and they're falling asleep. That's just not helpful. You just have to replace it, and it's really hard. Like parents, like I give them claps, goals,
Pat on the shoulder to the parents.
It's not easy. When I say it is not easy, and I just got to like add that I know it will not be perfect, but I just wish all schools would just take an intentional effort to really support these parents. Yes, I know some parents don't come to parent teacher night and all these things. I get it. But all systems that are presently in place really take a holistic approach and really support these parents. And when you're offering services, offer it in a duality way. When you're offering services for children and teens, offer supportive services for parents as well, because the parents really need help. They really need their inner child, and Therese can speak, Dr. Joseph can speak to this. They really need that inner child to be addressed. And so, that's just really key. And once that inner child is addressed and validated, you will start to see the shift.
Yes.
To see the shift.
Yeah. I speaking of inner child work, inner child work is so important if you want to raise children, right? And the evidence is always going to be there when you haven't done your inner child work. I remember watching a live, an Instagram live recently. Was it an Instagram live or a reel? I don't remember. By Crystal Tomlinson. I don't know how many of you follow Crystal Tomlinson. If you don't, you should.
She's the ex of Beanie Man, and then Beanie
yes, she's Beanie Man's ex. I hate to refer to her.
Sorry, Miss Tomlinson, but sorry, yeah. But
she is.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, she's
also
amazing.
Yeah,
she is absolutely amazing. She has a brand new fiance, so I don't even want to call her name in association with the ex, but apart from the men that she has been associated with, in her own right, she is so powerful. And I watched a reel on her Instagram page sometime recently in which she was talking about the very thing that you just mentioned, which is the importance of doing your inner child work so that you become a better parent as a result. And she gave an example, which I thought was, genius. Genius, not just because it's such an excellent example and so practical for anybody to understand, but also I thought genius because of how self-aware she clearly is, in order to have even known that this is an example of her inner child work that still needed to be done. And she said she was packing her daughter's lunch. The daughter was going off on a field trip. So they were not going to eat lunch in school. This was a lunch that had to be something that could move with you quickly, easily, something that was, not easily perishable, those types of things, because there wasn't going to be any refrigerator. They were not indoors. They would be outside, wherever they were going for this field trip. And she said that as a child, she grew up in a community, in a household that was not, they were not well off. But on a day like that, when the school is going on a field trip, that was the day when the parents would go out of their way to pack their child's lunchbox with a little piece of KFC, the little burger and fries, something special. Not the regular bread, butter, and cheese. You know what I mean? Because it's a field trip day. It's exciting. So the parents get excited too. And it's a special lunch that day. And she said that she, as a child, remember, she used to look forward to that. It was a big deal. And so she could not understand why her child could not get behind that. Because her child did not want KFC. Her child did not want Burger King or anything. She said that her child made it very clear. What she wanted was a hot dog with a regular sausage, and she didn't want no ketchup and mustard and relish. It just the hot dog and the sausage. You know how children can be particular about how they want their sandwich made, right? And she was like, she said she spent a good hour trying to convince the little girl that maybe today you sure you don't want, right? And the little girl was adamant, no, I just want the bread and put the meat in and don't put anything on it. Krista said she shamed because she knew what the other parents were going to be packing in the lunch boxes for their children. But she realized that that was not about her child. At this point, it's no longer about the child. This is her inner child desperately wanting to fit in with the other children who were going to have KFC in their lunch boxes, because that is what the little girl in her always wanted to have. The little girl in her would be very, very embarrassed and humiliated to not show up with KFC at her field trip when she was a child. And so she could not fathom, she couldn't move past that place in her brain when she was packing the lunch for her child's field trip, except that her child did not have those traumas. Her child did not live that life that she had lived. So that meant nothing to her child. And she said that in that moment, she was like, Lord, I need to go back to therapy.
I can identify with Crystal. 100%.
Look at me projecting all of my childhood trauma onto my little girl here.
Yeah. But can I share a flip side story to that?
Yes.
Let me tell you. I used to be so upset with my child when she was attending ballet classes as a toddler, as a young child, especially like between ages 7 and 10. And actually even older than that, I used to be so angry with her.
Sorry, I'm a trained dancer. Okay,
I'm getting to why. Because I used to feel like this child, and I mean, the ballet school that she was attending, a lot of affluent families sent their children there. And I used to be so upset because I used to think that this child had people thinking we were poorer than we really were. Because this child would be wearing the Jacob Ladder stockings to ballet classes instead of the brand new stockings that I had bought the stockings. I remember one time at a recital, the teacher, hi, Sarah. We had asked parents to get brand new stockings, and so Nia doesn't have, but we managed to borrow a pair. And I'm furious because I had ordered the damn stockings on Amazon 3 weeks before. They were sitting on her dresser, and she has these people thinking I'm poorer than I am. Now, what made me just chups and just forget about it? Another mom, because I'm not a helicopter mom as much as I think I am. So with dance classes, and again, knowing my child, if from young I realized if I'm there, she's going to be looking for cues from me instead of paying attention to the instructor. So I used to be one of those moms that would drop her off, run errands, sit in the parking lot. And as a performing arts teacher, I understand how it works as well. So one day, a parent came to me and said, she had stopped her daughter from going to that particular dance school. And I was asking why, because the daughter is a very strong dancer. And what she said just blew my mind. She said she wished her daughter was like mine. I'm like, what are you talking about? Said she will sit down, because she's definitely a mom that will sit and hover and watch. And she will still notice my child in the Jacob ladder stockings, not giving a shit, just moving about, doing her dance, doing what she has to do. She doesn't care if anybody's laughing. She just doesn't care what other people are thinking. And she's like, I really wish my daughter had that confidence. In my head, I'm like, confidence? That child making me out to be poorer than I look. And I really went home and marinated on it. And I was like, you know what? That really is a huge testament to me. Because I'm here thinking the child wearing the Jacob Ladder's stockings, but her confidence, she doesn't give a shit what anybody else is saying. She goes, she dances, she enjoys herself, she comes home.
Wow, your daughter is you.
just in another way. Just in another way.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we have to be so careful about projecting our stuff.
Yeah.
Including our insecurities as well, because
Yes.
with that particular parent, I know she had a colorism insecurity. I know that for a fact, because if I tell you, years before, when my daughter was about 6 months and she was pregnant with hers, I remember being in the supermarket and hearing some people whispering behind me. When I look back, she was like, hi, to my daughter in the basket, and she's like, oh, this is your baby. Said she was just telling her husband she hopes her child is born with my daughter's complexion. Oh, Lord, Serene, don't black out. So, but I'll tell you, and that's black out, because I'm telling you, in that same conversation.
Are you okay, Serene?
In that same conversation where she was saying how much she admires my daughter's confidence, that my daughter doesn't care about the affluent child in the group. She doesn't care about not being invited to parties, not being whatever. She was able to also admit that she's sure she put some of her stuff on her child. Oh, my Serene.
Are you going to do a live on colorism? Because it's still alive and well.
It's still, girl.
We're gonna do a live on colorism. It's where we're going to. We should.
And and it's still heavy, in the African countries, Caribbean countries, islands. I mean, I was blessed that my dad instilled. I never had a complex about my skin complexion, but many people my age, they did. So when I was called tar baby, I was like, I have no idea why you're saying that. That doesn't make sense to me, but the average person in my day, my generation, it normally would have impacted. And it's just so, oh my gosh, it is so damaging to one's self-esteem.
Right.
Child. No.
Yeah, we're gonna do a live on colorism. We're gonna do it.
Let me just say, can I just share this? I know, because it just brought it back a memory, and I was sharing with someone when people don't think people remember. So, I wasn't born in Antigua, but I had to go to Antigua every summer. My mom wanted to make sure that I knew I think she just really wanted me to make sure I knew my culture. My siblings were there. And I guess I would go with an aunt or whomever to the bank. And what is it? Is it, I forgot the name of the bank. It's right on the corner from CIBC, I think, on High Street. And when you walk in there, because that was like one of the biggest banks, I think. And I remember clear as day that the tellers were light skinned. I never saw a dark skinned person behind. Now, as a child, I didn't have the verbiage. I didn't have the language to say what I noticed. But in my head, there was something odd about what I was seeing. And it was odd because my father was just very much, if nobody can bring me a white doll, he would get pissed off. There was no white Santa. He would blacken Santa's face. And he would always, really compliment me on my skin color and make sure I knew that how beautiful it was. So that had brought a sense of awareness when I would go to the bank and I would see these light-skinned women behind. And there was just something about, and I was just looking. And then I remember as I got older, and I think I saw one, I went back to this bank for whatever reason with whomever, and there was a darker skinned teller there. And I remember feeling happy, but I still didn't have the language for it. But I say all that to say that it's, it goes back to the adults. Like your behavior and the way that you're functioning is impacting these children, and you got to hold yourselves accountable.
Yes.
Seriously. That's I get off my soapbox.
That's
Just,
let's wrap this conversation up, shall we? This was good. This was good though. This was good. So Mr. has gone off to rally around the West Indies.
Yeah.
Which we completely support. We need to support the West Indies cricket team who are playing in Antigua tonight. So we're sending positive vibes to them and to anybody who is going to watch them play tonight. I understand that the match is going to start at around 8:30. So you're going to log off of this live and make your way to go and watch the cricket, I guess. Be safe. I want to thank these ladies for being here with me today for this conversation. This was good.
Yeah.
We touched on things I did not even imagine would come up in today's conversation. This was very good, but this is how I like it. I like when the conversation just takes a life of its own and things start surfacing that I had not even considered before. This is exactly how I like for it to go. So we really get to unpack things fully. So thank you so much for taking time out of your Sunday.
Thank you for the invitation. It's always good hanging with you and Serene. So thank you for the invitation.
Yes, we need to hang in Antigua together at some point.
Zara had me last time wobbling all the way back to country, but
I know exactly why you were wobbling, because I know Zara very well. Zara has been my friend for many moons. And I am all too familiar with the activities that would go on when you are hanging out with Zara. I'm very happy that you made it home, though.
It's not like we were doing tequila shots, though. We didn't do tequila shots that time, though.
It wasn't that serious.
No, we didn't. I don't know why we did. I don't remember. Yeah, because I had to ride back to country. That's why.
Oh my God.
But Dr. Joseph, I hope that you would take this live to Antigua one day. That would be so wonderful.
I mean, that's something to consider,
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Anyone listening, sponsor Always a Queen in Antigua and Barbuda.
Yeah,
that would be phenomenal.
And we can do a weekly chat about the mental health landscape in Antigua and Barbuda. That would be good. Something to look into.
Definitely.
Something to look into. Yeah.
We need to continue these conversations. And it's been wonderful to see the growth of awareness to mental health. It's not where I would like it to be, but there is such a difference in terms of even having a conversation about mental health that we didn't have 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we keep evolving. We continue to evolve.
Yes.
So let's call it a night, shall we?
We shall.
And yes.
Rally behind the West Indies.
That part. Are you going to the cricket match?
No.
No. Okay.
Unfortunately, no.
Well, you can rally from home.
Yeah, that's the plan. That's
And
the
then
plan.
Serena and I will rally from New York. We're sending good vibes. That's how
All
we can
good
remember
vibes.
too.
All good vibes.
All right. Thank you to the people who have been watching and listening to us on Facebook, on Instagram, on where else are we live? YouTube, and on LinkedIn, because we are live on my LinkedIn page as well. So thank you to all the persons who have been watching, to those who were interacting with us in the chat section. Thank you so very much for being here for another Always the Queen, the Metamorphosis podcast. I will see you at the next podcast. Continue to follow, like, and subscribe to all of the Always the Queen platforms so you can support this movement as we continue to empower and elevate our women and our children, and our men too. We're empowering and elevating everybody on this platform. All right. In the meantime, I send love and light and abundance to all of you, and remember to be a beautiful week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.